Legend of Total War here, and today I'm going to be going over Total War Warhammer 3 patch 6.1 dev blog. There's a lot of really useful information here. I'm going to give my thoughts on it, and I'd love to hear your thoughts on it as well, because 6.1 is including a massive rework. Now, the previous 0.1, so 5.1, was one of my favorite patches because it really enhanced the dwarfs quite a bit, and now the dwarfs are actually one of my favorite factions to play, which I never thought that would have actually happened, given how much I really disliked them, especially in Warhammer 1. But yeah, these 0.1 patches have so far been really substantial, and it looks as though this is continuing on that legacy. It definitely seems like there is a new team involved in the the custodian team, and I think it is CA Sophia. I'm not 100% sure of it, but all indications point to it. I don't know who William is here. I haven't previously heard of him, but I wish him the best with this monumental project of trying to actually fix up this game, because it does have a lot of problems. And I think one of the problems that Warhammer 3 is facing at the moment is basically stale game. It's been out for 3 years now, but it's really longer than that, because Total War Warhammer 1, 2, and 3, there's not a huge amount of difference between each game. And so Total War Warhammer in its entirety has been out for basically 9 years now, and so it's starting to get a bit stale, especially when they're not fixing core issues such as butt ladders, bad AI, and numerous other things. So the custodian team definitely got to it way too late, but better late than never. But yeah, I do wish them the best with this. Anyway, the Kislev stuff, this is the main thing I really want to focus on, because the Tzeentch stuff, I don't really have too many thoughts on it, but I'll just go over it briefly. Anyway, the Kislev stuff, so it looks like it's a pretty major overhaul, so I'm not going to read everything out word for word. You can just read it out yourself. I'll leave a link to it in the description if you want to do that. But yeah, just put this in my own words, basically. So the Orthodoxy, what's it called? The race between Katerin and the Great Orthodoxy, Kislev, that is over now. But this image here is extremely confusing, because it looks as though he's playing as Grease's Goldtooth, but has access to the Court Orthodoxy mechanic. So maybe it's done that deliberately so that we don't actually know which faction he's playing as. What I really wanted to know with this was, is Astankia going to get access to this? Is Boris Ursus going to get access to this? Or is only Katerin and Kislev going to get access to this? That's kind of what I'm assuming, since this is supposed to replace that particular mechanic, but I would really hope at least Boris gets access to this. I would kind of understand if Astankia didn't, because she's got her own stanky finger mechanic, but I really think that Boris should get access to this, because this is no longer a race to confederate them. It's support for one side or the other with various benefits, so it's like a balancing act, which kind of reminded me a little bit of the steel and stone mechanic that Yuan Bo got. But as for how it's actually going to play out, there's a whole bunch of numbers and things that you can potentially click on here, but I mean, in terms of the UI that they're showing us a screenshot, but what it actually does, I don't know, chill dude, cool vibes. I have a feeling these are just placeholder names, I don't know, and what they actually do, I have no idea. So we're not going to find that out. It's clear that they're playing some sort of debug mode, and it seems as though what you do is you accumulate support based on the types of actions that you do. So certain buildings will increase your influence over the Ice Court, or improve that. Certain buildings will improve it for the Orthodoxy. Hard to say exactly what it's going to do, because they don't give details about all that. And then as you fill this up, you basically get a Ice Court point or an Orthodoxy point, and then you spend it on various things. It looks like all of this is Orthodoxy points. So again, these are probably all just placeholders. Maybe they just haven't fixed the UI for it. It's really hard to say, because it does really look like work in progress. But it also looks like there's 5 separate tabs. So it does seem like there's a fair bit that we'll be able to do with this. It's not going to be a one-dimensional system that becomes outdated as of turn 30, like many other mechanics tend to be. Like the old the Orthodoxy race to supremacy, or whatever it was, that became outdated the moment that you actually finished it, because you just basically confederate the opponent, and then that's it. You just don't play into it that much anymore. But this looks like it would take a lot longer to actually reach that point of obsolescence, but hard to say until we actually play it, because they give you a bit of a brief outline about what it is, but as for the actual how it is fine-tuned actually going to work, we don't have that information yet, so we'll just have to wait. But overall, this looks good. Then they've got a rework of the devotion mechanic. So I wasn't ever really that much of a fan of devotion, and what they're doing now, it does seem better, but I got my hang-ups with it. So instead of control, so that's gone now. It's now devotion. So it's between 0 and 100 by the look of it, because that's right in the middle. And if it hits 0, I guess a chaos revolt will happen. I'm assuming, similar to how it currently works. When you've got low devotion, it causes like a chaos revolt. It could be Beastmen, could be Norska, it could be who knows. My main concern with this is that it might, if that is the case, and I'm making some assumptions here, it could make it very difficult for you to revive factions. Let's just say if Boris Ursus gets wiped out, if this always causes a chaos revolt, then you won't be able to bring back other factions that have been wiped out so you can confederate them later. I don't know if that's the case, but that's just a slight concern that I have based on what I'm seeing here. But yeah, and you can also spend the devotion, and this is on a province-to-province basis now. It's not like a global resource that you spend. So obviously there would be things like corruption would decrease devotion. Public order buildings, such as the Orthodoxy Church, would increase devotion. It's basically the same thing as control, but how you use it is different. And you've got these diktats here, which basically straight off ripped probably from Slaanesh. I imagine one will be for like increasing public order. For this, probably at the cost of money. Again, I'm just speculating. Who knows? But you basically work it one way or another. Apparently, there's one that will make it so that all the climate effects will be negated, but it's like one that it's constantly active. So while it's active, you won't be able to do any other ones. But that's really good because I know a lot of people don't like the climate mechanic, and basically the diktats there will give you the opportunity of just basically erasing it as long as you've actually got enough devotion. And apparently, the higher the devotion, the better your armies will actually fight in those particular areas. But overall, I'm definitely keen to see how this actually works out. But yeah, it's no longer a global effect. But I think one of the best things that it's doing now is making the Atamans more useful. So currently, the way Atamans work is you can apply one every time you gain 2 full provinces. Then you place it down in a province, and it will just, over time, provide better and better benefits to it. But you can eventually recruit that Ataman as a regular boyar, but then you can't put them back as an Ataman. So you can't do that anymore. Atamans are like permanent governors. I guess akin to how the camp tyrants work, which is good because I like that system. I think it worked way better than what it did before. And they now will get skill tree, so over time they'll get more experience, they'll get better. I imagine it's not just based on whether or not they win battles, but also based on construction, because that happens with the camp tyrants. They gain experience based on not just the battles that they fight, but also the buildings that they construct. So you can kind of give them more experience by building something and then demolishing it and then rebuilding it again. That's one way of getting the more experience, just sort of cheesing it, but then you're actually costing a fair bit of food, but it just depends on how you want to balance that. I don't know how this is going to work with the Atamans, but apparently another really good thing, and this is very unique for Total War, well, at least with the Warscape engine, Atamans now enable a new feature for settlements, tentatively called Garrison Sally Attack, where you can command settlement managed by them to engage enemies within a limited distance, as if the settlements themselves were armies. Of course, the capital of the province is led by the Ataman himself, who takes the field with the garrison during the attack. Now, it doesn't give us 100% details, but we can make a few assumptions here. Basically, I'm assuming that you can click on your city, and it'll have a range from which you are able to attack. So if a piddly little army shows up in that area, you can basically just tell your garrison, attack this, so you don't have to wait for it to actually besiege, and also that'll stop piddly little armies from raiding your territory and constantly causing you problems. This is really something that should just be applied to the entire game, to every single faction that has settlements. This just should be a thing in all future Total Wars for all garrisons. You should be able to take your garrison within a limited distance and just attack things if you want. Obviously, you don't have to. But yeah, this would stop like one lord armies from just rolling around and annoying you. So you don't have to bring up one of your stationed full stacks to go over a deal with it. You just send your garrison out to go and take it out. That is super good if that is the case. And they really should just be applying that to every single faction. I don't see any reason why that shouldn't be the case. That's not something that should just be unique to Kislev. Because the AI being super annoying has been a thing like forever with Total War, where they're obsessed with just annoying the player, sending piddly little armies after they've been smashed by your main armies, and just like raiding your minor settlements or whatever, and your minor settlements garrison just being like, well, we just have to wait until they attack us. So that should be quite good. But how it actually works out, we'll wait and see. But overall, I really like the changes from what I can see here. So that's really good. And yeah, getting a skill tree as well. And they've also got a tech tree update. I mean, this is pretty typical, what you usually expect with a rework. As for what these technologies now do, we'll have to wait and see. But, it seems as though they're actually going to add attributes to things as opposed to just extra stats. So that could be good. But for example, armor plus 10 for Tsar Guard units. That's not very much. Charge bonus defense versus large. That is actually quite substantial. So I mean, that just shows off one technology. How many technologies there are, it's hard to say. Just don't know, because there's 3 different branches of it now. And it's no longer locked behind whether or not you own or are allied to the other Kislevite cities. So that'll be especially useful for Astankia, who was locked out of her tech tree for a good portion of her campaign unless you prioritize getting over there early. So that's good. And then, so that's the Kislev stuff. And I think, based on what I'm seeing here, this is a really good rework. Is it on par with like the Beastman rework? Probably not. But I also don't think Kislev really needed a massive overhaul the way that the Beastman did. I kind of use the Beastman as like the benchmark for like the best, like the biggest, bestest overhaul I've ever seen. But not every faction really needs it. The only faction that I can think of that needs a Beastman level rework right now is Norska. Actually, Warriors of Chaos, I would say that was also a Beastman level rework with what they got back at the beginning of Immortal Empires. Anyway, let's move on to Tzeentch stuff. Now, as far as I can see here, and this is a little bit confusing, and I found it a bit difficult to pay attention to all those shit that was like here. So I may have missed some of this stuff. But from what I can tell, they're not necessarily reworking Tzeentch unless they're just focusing on Kairos here with the blog, and there's more stuff to come. But all of this information is just focused on Kairos and entirely focused on his fragments of sorcery. So how it currently works is that in his skill tree, you can put points into various fragments of Shaiish, fragments of Hish, so on and so forth. And so if you want to have access to life magic, you put 1 point into it. If you want to get the spell lore passive, put another point into it, and so on and so forth. You don't have to get them all, but it does. If you want to get them all, you have to spend a fair few points. That being said, you can also only attach one of the fragments at a time because it takes up one of his equipment slots, and so you don't have access to them all at any given time. So there's not really a whole lot of incentive to put all the points in. It's usually just life magic and death magic. Death magic primarily for life leeching, for example. But now it seems as though Kairos is going to have another way of going about it, and how it's actually going to work is not clear here. And what it seems to they've done here is actually shown you guys the processes that they've gone through with the UI on how they want to go about it. So this was seemingly their first attempt, and that was fucking messy as hell by the look of it. So I'm glad that they ditched that. And then they're moving on to like an eye, which this looks much better. This is still the early stages of it. And then I think what they're trying to get to is something like this, where basically you've got, from what I can tell here, 9 spell slots, which that is the number of Tzeentch, so that makes sense. So it's good they're being sort of lore friendly there. And it seems as though you unlock more slots, and then you choose a spell to go in that slot based on what you've got unlocked, based on what tier of spell it is. That's what it seems like. So for example, in maybe this spot here, you can't choose anything other than tier 1 spells. So you can't just have like all like the biggest, baddest spells. You have to choose a spell relative to its particular tier in the particular lore of magic. But he should have access to essentially 9 laws of magic, being Tzeentch and the 8 core winds of magic. And I imagine this central one here is probably dedicated to Tzeentch magic, just a guess, but I have no idea. And then the other ones could be dedicated to the other 8. And I imagine that you could have it all be life magic if you want, but like this one here is like the tier 1 spell, the tier 2 spell, tier 3 spell, tier 4 spell, and you can only switch it with other tier 4 spells in that particular slot. Something along those lines, but I'm not entirely sure. And it could be because each head, based on what I've read here, each head is supposed to know 4 laws of magic. It could be that sort of like all the I guess good laws of magic are on this side. So I'm just assuming here it'd be like life, heavens, light. I don't know. Can't think of the other one. And then this one would be like death, shadow, fire on the other side. So you can't have like fire spells in this slot here. I'm just assuming, like, we don't have full details here. I'm imagining that's how it's going. So basically you choose from 4 different laws of magic here, 4 different laws of magic there, and Tzeentch magic here. I think. I don't know. It could be as well that you put Tzeentch magic in these ones as well. Again, I have no idea. So it could be really interesting to see how this works. But that really just affects such a small portion of the game. But that being said, when it comes to playing as Kairos specifically, he is the faction. Like, you have to rely so heavily on him and his spellcasting, so that could be really good. But yeah, that seems like a lot of work is going into just reworking his skills with this. No word on other types of reworks being done to Tzeentch, which I do think Tzeentch needs a rework. Out of the 4 Chaos Gods, I do think that, like, thematically, I like Tzeentch. But the way it plays in-game, I think is one of the least interesting. And considering they've had their DLC, they really need more of a rework. I don't think their changing of the way mechanic is particularly interesting. I think the way their economy work is extremely basic. I like how Khorne and Nurgle have now become more distinct, and I'd like to see Tzeentch become more distinct from the way it just plays too similar to other factions apart from the cheat code system. And of course, when it comes to Slaanesh, I don't expect anything to them to get more interesting until their rework, assuming that's the next DLC. So I'm not expecting anything for that right now. But yeah, for Tzeentch, it would be really good to get them a bit more of an overhaul. Probably on the same sort of tier as the Ice Court, but getting 2 reworks in one patch, we take whatever wins we can get. And honestly, I think the Kislev stuff is a win, and I think that this Kairos stuff here is just like a meh. It doesn't really interest me that much, just like changing that stuff. I think it's good, but not enough to bring me back to Kairos on itself, because I think I've got a whole other branch of problems with Kairos's camp, or just Tzeentch in general, just being a boring faction to play. I think their cheat code system is just not very interesting. It gets boring very quickly. And then they're not adjusting the Changeling. They sort of explain how the Changeling is sort of a divisive faction, which I agree with, and that it should probably stay that way, because it shouldn't be that every faction should be beloved by everyone, and having it be a little bit more niche is probably a good thing. And I completely agree with that sentiment. And I think that for what the Changeling campaign is trying to do, I think it does a pretty good job. It just doesn't necessarily appeal to me specifically because it's just a weird non-Total Warrior type campaign. But I have no actual issue with the Changeling campaign, apart from just Tzeentch in general just not being very interesting. And then we get some free units. So they haven't done the artwork for it yet, but they've got a Cathay bomb unit and a Slinger Noblar unit for the Ogres. So that's good, getting some free units. I think that'll be good for people. Looks like it's on the lower end of the tier side of things, so probably very early on the campaign for both of them. I don't know if Cathay really needed this unit, or if Ogres really needed this unit, but, a lot of people just like to have variety, and giving them more units, that's fine. But I don't personally care too much for these units, based on what I'm seeing here. I mean, getting, essentially, Skaven Slave Slingers for Ogres, I don't think that was something that was really essential to them early on, but whatever. And yeah, getting a bomb unit. I've never really been that much of a fan of bomb units, just because they are short range, and I much prefer high range over short range, typically speaking. Not always. I mean, there's some situations, like if you're going up against a huge melee-focused army, and you can get them to blob up, then that's going to be really bloody good. So that could actually be really good in the early game for Miao Ying, when she's dealing with Clan Eshin, because Eshin just spams out shitloads of Skaven slaves. So having a bomb unit being able to kill off 1,000 of them will be good, because yeah, oftentimes people get very badly outnumbered by the Skaven, and their Jade Warrior crossbowmen just end up running out of ammunition. Anyway, that's all I've got to say about this. Overall, I think this is pretty good for patch 6.1. I think it's maybe even better, or at least as far as what I can see, than patch 5.1. And that really set the bar quite high, I think. So this all looks great. I'm looking forward to checking it out in about 2 weeks, unless it gets delayed, which is fine if it does. You know, I just want to make sure that when they get it out there, that it's not like completely broken or busted or anything like that and require like 10 hotfixes or anything. So take your time, get it done right. But all the ideas here seem pretty good, and I'm keen to check them out. Anyway, guys, that's the end of this one. Let me know in the comments below what you think of these changes, whether you think they're good or bad or in a bit between. I'm keen to hear your thoughts. Anyway, it's in this one. Appreciate you, and we'll see you next time. Later, guys.